We start our show with breaking news. The Milwaukee Bucks have fired head coach Adrian Griffin, according to our senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski, who is here alongside myself, Chiney Ogwumike, Richard Jefferson. Griffin was hired in June, and in his 43 games as head coach, he went 30-13 in that time. So why is this happening now, Woj?
Yeah, I think this was an agonizing decision for this Milwaukee organization. They were very fond of Adrian Griffin. They gave him his first head coaching opportunity this offseason. But they looked at where this team was, how it was responding under Griffin. Although the second best record right now, you mentioned 30-13, that they have such a tight championship window with Giannis Antetokounmpo, certainly the Damian Lillard trade, which happened after they hired Griffin as head coach. And they made a decision to make the change. They told Adrian Griffin of that just within the last hour, I'm told, that he's out. And this is a Milwaukee team that you have seen at every turn trying to maximize, again, this championship window. And they make a really difficult decision today to move on from Adrian Griffin. And I'm told now, Joe Prunty is expected to be the interim coach. You've seen him as an interim coach previously in Milwaukee after Jason Kidd, in Atlanta also. But they're going to start a search immediately for a new head coach. They want an accomplished veteran head coach who's available. And I'm told that Doc Rivers is among the very serious candidates that Milwaukee is going to look at here as they move forward.
Wow, so Joe Prunty takes over for the third time as interim head coach in his career. Adrian Griffin once again out as the Milwaukee Bucks head coach, and now a search commences. I have so many questions, Richard, but let's just start with your first blush response to this.
It's shocking. We had the opportunity to interview Adrian Griffin at the start of the season, and just, so many times coaches say, when you take over as a first-time head coach, you don't realize all the decisions that you are having to make. I was a part of a team in 2016 that let go of their coach, and T. Lue took over. But I think that situation was very different because you had an individual that had been there with that group for 2 years.
Right.
It wasn't a new voice. It wasn't a new system. So to bring in a Doc Rivers situation, to bring in anybody in there, it does add a difficulty. We saw it last year with Quinn Snyder coming in there in the middle of the season.
But Quinn also had time to assess, right?
Yeah.
His runway is very different. To me, I think it was shocking because what did we see last night? A Giannis Antetokounmpo triple-double. They're coming off of a win. They have the second best record right now in the NBA. But the reality is, we talk about this so much here on this program. If you want to be a championship team, you need to have a championship defense, at least in the top 10. Last year, the Milwaukee Bucks had a championship defense. They were fourth in defense. This year, they're 22nd. And particularly in January, they've been 27th. I think that's just, no matter how much you love your coach, there are certain standards, especially when you have Giannis and you put all the chips in the middle of the table to get Dame Lillard. And a lot of people have been criticizing how they've looked. And I think that recipe was not necessarily for success for them in this highly pressured year one with that amazing duo.
The Bucks have won 5 of their last 6 games, but the last 4 just really have not been that convincing when you look at the ways in which they have won. I guess next my question is, Woj, what does this mean for Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Well, listen, you are always on the clock with players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, even when they sign an extension. And so I think, I don't think this was a Giannis decision. I think this was, Chiney mentioned the defense. This defense was not going to be the same defense if Mike Budenholzer was here, if Tom Thibodeau was here. They traded out Damian Lillard. They traded out Jrue Holiday to bring in Damian Lillard. You are not going to guard the ball. You're not going to guard the perimeter in the same way that you did when you had Jrue Holiday spearheading that defense. But they have given up a lot of points. They've been a team that, despite the record and winning, being on a streak, it hasn't, I think, to Milwaukee, felt right, looked right. And I think, again, this is an organization that, took some risk hiring a young coach in the offseason. He was part of a pretty broad search. And I think Adrian Griffin's going to be a good head coach in the NBA. I think they feel that in Milwaukee also, that he is going to be a good head coach. This is a unique situation where it is win now, give ourselves as the Bucks the best possible chance to compete with the elite of the league. They didn't think they had that anymore with Adrian Griffin. and now they're going to go out in the marketplace, talk to some coaches. Again, I think Doc Rivers, who was in Philadelphia the last 3 years, the Clippers before that, obviously won a championship with the Boston Celtics. He is somebody who has Milwaukee roots, played his college basketball at Marquette, is popular in that region, obviously grew up in Chicago. I think that's going to be a point of focus for the Bucks now as they start this search, which may wrap up pretty quickly.
And as you just saw at home, the Griffin had the best record by a head coach to get to Smith's midseason since David Blatt in 2015-16.
Well, no, I just would like to echo the points that Woj made. Adrian Griffin is going to be a very good head coach in this league. I've had him as a player. I've played with him. I've been coached by him. I know that he knows what he is doing.
Yeah.
Was this the ideal situation, even with the endorsement from different players? This might not have been the best situation for a first-year head coach. But really, it's championship or bust, especially when you get an individual like Dame added to your roster. So that's where it became difficult. I don't think this is an indictment as much on Adrian Griffin's ability to coach.
Sure.
I think it was more of with this group, with their timetable, as a very young new head coach.
Right.
That's what makes it difficult.
Well, look, this is a huge decision to take at this point in the season. And Woj can correct me if I'm wrong. He's up there. But I believe this hiring came down to Adrian Griffin, Nick Nurse, who's now in Philadelphia doing a great job, and Kenny Atkinson, who's still in Golden State. So the roads not taken for the Bucks are pretty interesting. But look, they do have a great record, but they've played the easiest schedule in the NBA by a wide margin. Their defense just has not been good enough. And that's not all on Adrian Griffin. That's a player thing and a personnel change thing as well. But you look at some of the stuff that's happened so far in the season. Terry Stotts left the job. He was brought there to be the lead assistant and kind of the veteran mentor. He said, something's wrong here. I don't like it. First 10 games of the season, they're playing a much more aggressive defense, and the players go to Adrian Griffin and say, hey, we've done it one way under Mike Budenholzer. Can we go back to that way? And Adrian Griffin listened to them. That's a good sign. Their transition defense has been a mess all season, and we've been on this show talking about why are we not seeing more Dame, Giannis, pick and roll? And that's only the stuff that's on the surface. And all those guys up on the desk there nailed it. They just don't have time to wait for all of those issues to settle and everything to settle down. This team's got to win right now, and they're winning, but if you know it when you see it. They've been winning, but not in the manner that suggests they can win 3 playoff series to get out of the East, when 2 of them are going to have to come against probably Philly and Boston. So whoever gets this job, there's a great team in here somewhere, and they've got to find it immediately. But there's been smoke simmering almost since they hired Adrian Griffin. That's just the bottom line.
So Adrian Griffin out, but Damian Lillard's still there. Giannis Antetokounmpo's still there. Where do the Bucks go from here? How do they fix this defense?
Well, all I can think about is because I've been in a circumstance where our coach left, mid-season, and it does destabilize the locker room a little bit, but sometimes I think it can galvanize also, because sometimes you just need a different voice in the room. And if they respond well to a different voice in the room, I think they're looking at the overall landscape and seeing how teams are improving and how it felt like, at the time when this trade was made, everyone was like, oh, wow, it's the Bucks world. And now we're seeing so many competitors to that. I think the focus has to be Giannis. I've seen Giannis over the past few months since the season started. He's had, outputs of 64 points. He's had outputs of 54 points. He's also tried to modify to suit this team. He had a game where he had 11 points and 16 assists not too long ago. They've been searching for some kind of fluidity. They've been searching for some type of continuity. I think finding that ability of a coach to say, all right, Giannis, this is exactly what we expect of you. Dame, this is exactly what we expect of you. I've seen the players try to do that in real time. That's why I'm trying to tell you those different ranges of things that we've seen from Giannis. So I think just stabilizing and also changing the voice hopefully will give them enough of a pointed effort to see if they can really capitalize on this year.
Like I mentioned earlier, when David Blatt got fired in Cleveland, he had been there for a year and change. T. Lue was the associate head coach. T. Lue had been there for an entire year and a half. So the terminology stayed the same. The play stayed the same. The way we played changed. He definitely motivated us, got going. If another coach comes in here, it's the terminology. There is a learning curve that is going to be a lot harder. If people want to try and compare it to the situation in 2016, that is very different than what any head coach is going to come in with a championship or bust quality
but
team.
Is their issue the learning curve? Isn't their issue more so the effort, right? The effort.
Well, now you got to have effort and learning curve.
I think that's why the pressure was on the coach, because the learning, like, we all know that their makings of Dame and Giannis and the surrounding cast, they should be able to go out there and hoop. But it was the effort, the lack of effort that we're seeing. A lot of times we talk about defense, and like, you know, we saw some plays where Giannis was uncharacteristic defensively, you know, and that sort of put a question mark on what we're experiencing.
You know, Richard mentioned the David Blatt situation a year and a half in the job. When David Blatt was hired, LeBron James had not come back to Cleveland yet. He was hired for a very different team. It was a team built around Kyrie Irving. They loved his offensive expertise and building something offensively around Kyrie and the group they had. It changes when LeBron James comes back in free agency. Now, this is a little different in that, listen, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is the centerpiece of all of this, was in place. But it was a different team with Drew Holiday versus Damian Lillard. Sure. And certainly defensively, whether you looked at, it was Nick Nurse, and Zach mentioned it. Those were the other two finalists, Nick Nurse, Kenny Atkinson. One was a championship coach. Kenny Atkinson had been a head coach in Boston, in Brooklyn, had some success, and has been with Steve Kerr in Golden State for a few years. You know, three very different kinds of coaches. But I think that trade happens, and now they get this far into it. And again, you look at the standings and you say, they're right there. But it was, I think, feeling like, were they maximizing this group? I think, as Zach said, they've had the easiest schedule in the league. It's going to get a lot harder. You know, you saw them, you know, get run by the Pacers 4 times. The speed and athleticism of dominant guard play, the problem they were having with that at the defensive end. And now, you know, listen, I think if they were to look back at the summer and how they conducted the search, they might feel differently about hiring a first-time head coach. And now they're going to go out, and if it's Doc Rivers, certainly you have a coach who's had, you know, certainly won a championship in Boston, but, you know, had led a very successful Eastern Conference team over the last 3 seasons.
Perk, what's your reaction to this?
You know, Malika, I wanted to come on here and talk about what's up with Giannis and why Giannis, you know, running through these coaches over the last couple months, but I can't. The Milwaukee Bucks actually got this one right. And they did something that a lot of franchises are afraid to do, and that's stop the bleeding. They stopped the bleeding early. Look, when you're a team that have championship aspirations, then your goal is to reach the championship, especially after they traded for Damian Lillard, right? You could see in body language if a team is ready and the head coach has the ears of his team. And looking at their body language, their defensive effort, and watching them play, their post-game comments, the writing was on the wall. And so you rather stop the bleeding now, and I get it. Everybody was fooled and blinded by the fact that they are 30-13 and they're number 2 in the Eastern Conference. But at the end of the day, they just wasn't a championship team with Adrian Griffin at the head of the seat.
So, Perk, Woj is also reporting that the Bucks are planning to move quickly to pursue a small group of accomplished and available veteran head coaches, with Doc Rivers being one of them. You have experience with Doc. How do you think he would fit there?
Dang, we didn't get that much time to work. I was hoping to call a game with Doc, but you know what? If it's any coach that they should go get, and I'm not being biased here, it should be Doc Rivers, because Doc Rivers didn't deserve to get fired from Philadelphia. When it comes to putting stars in the right position to be successful, Doc Rivers could do that. When it comes to gathering the troops to believe in to buy into what he's saying, Doc Rivers could do that. And I really don't see no other coach out there that could actually go in and fulfill this role right now other than Doc Rivers. You can't put an assistant in this role. Like, Joe Mazzulla is a unique situation, right? Adrian Griffin should have been with a team that's rebuilding, not a championship team. But if I had to make a choice, damn it, I'm calling Doc Rivers right now.
I'm on fire. It's NBA,